Hello?
Howdy. I'm in Starbucks right now.
What was that?
I'm in Starbucks right now.
Oh, yeah, I can see.
I forgot my headphones. So, okay, I'm gonna have to be careful because, no, I mean, it's not a problem. But obviously, if there are people around me, they can hear you. I mean, not that, anyone's, yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's fine. We're just waiting for a few more people to show up. We'll get started. Hi.
Hello, orthogonals. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You're
Hi.
doing such important work here. Even if I'm exhausted, busy, I plan not to attend. I thought I'd just come in and say hi and try not to engage with this draining conversation tonight.
Yeah, that's fine.
How is everything going?
Pretty good. Yeah.
How do you cope with your mental overload, Bradley and Hussain and everyone?
I mean, there's strategies. You take breaks when you need to. I mean, not necessarily like binge for like 6 months and then take, I mean, I usually kind of do it during the week, just take breaks from it. And, try to keep on top of things, but don't try to get obsessed over things. And we've tried to also, we've tried to also segment the meetings more like after the fact. So like we have a lot of videos that we have all these meetings, and it's like we can segment out like different features and write blog posts on them. I've done that in the past, where like if we have an important discussion that goes over a couple weeks, I will like write up a post and like take like clips from those meetings and say, this is this discussion, and it just kind of highlights those parts. And we've done that for a couple of them in the last year, so that's always good too, because you don't have to wade through a bunch of things to get to some good discussions. And it's always good to target what you're thinking. If you're thinking of some idea that you encountered, and this happens with like literature review as well, you can like have it sort of queued up, and you say, oh yeah, we had the discussion about some sort of computation. I'll have to go back and look. And so that's like kind of post processing all of this. So that's kind of another thing. I haven't done it as much as I'd like to, but they're just ways you have to reduce the bandwidth or I guess sometimes things are noise, sometimes things are signal, and you have to find the signal in there and like focus it.
Yeah, and that takes processing, doesn't it? Yeah. And I don't know what the rest of the week looks like for you people, but for me, like the rest of the universe, my brain expands and contracts.
Yeah.
And so when it's expanding, I just can take in a lot of information, and then suddenly it reached saturation point, and you said, "Wait a minute, I need to squeeze everything out and focus on." And the brain picks out everything kind of focus on, and then normally when I'm in the expansion, I have more listening time. And then when I need to work on something, I need to try. I cannot use the bandwidth to take in more input. And I need to just close down all the channels. So it depends a little bit. When normally after a deadline, after all my deadlines are met, but at the moment I'm in a difficult situation. I'm not focusing on working out. I'm not focusing on interest. I haven't managed to merge all my interest into my profession. So this is why I'm an independent researcher. So basically, I pursue my personal interest as much as I see fit. But then I feel like there are other aspects of my life. Like I should be working more. I should take care of my health more. I should just go out more. So anyway, so this is now all of my excuses for when I'm not going to be here. And then, but I really value this being part of the lab. I want to stress that.
No, that's good. Yeah. That's one of the things about our model is that people participate as they can. So we do things like, we have the meetings live, and then we have the YouTube recordings, and then, we have the post-processing of that, and we have the same for other meetings, and hopefully people get what they need out of it, because it's not easy to
Yeah, and so
yeah.
during the week you have the Friday meetings, which Jess and Hussain tried to invite me to, but I couldn't. I mean, I still haven't finished reading everything that was shared on this channel. Morgan pointed me to some possible resources for visualization. I haven't actually had the time because I'm trying to get other things. So I couldn't take more on challenge. But apart from these two meetings, you also have a Monday, right? With the DevWorm.
Yeah,
DevWorm.
yeah. We have the Monday meeting, DevoWorm. We have Friday open source. We have this meeting, and then sometimes we have Wednesday and Thursday meetings for other topics as well. So that's it gets busy, but like we try to cover cover a lot in this meeting very generally, and then go to those meetings and do things that are more focused. So
For
yeah,
me, this is learning.
yeah, yeah. All right. Yeah, yeah. Please ask questions as we go along. So it's always good to get feedback from people on things, how things are organized, how to strategies for finding things. That sort of wayfinding strategy and information. That's important. That's an important skill. Yeah, welcome to the meeting. We'll get started. Hello, Hussain and Jess and Paola. Uh, and so yeah, we this week we had our Monday meeting, which was the beginning of the coding period for DevoWorm. We had our Friday open source meeting. So Hussain talked about some of the things he's working on with multiphysics and some of the software that you need for that sort of a thing, and some of the challenges around building features into software, academic software and otherwise. And I just went back through the meeting and I was like, this is a pretty good impromptu session talking about like building features into things. I teach project management as well. Yeah, I teach project management as well, and it has like overlap with that where we have this unit on feature building. How do you, like, when you have a product or project, you'll build some sort of product, and then that product will have features, and how do you know what the features are? How do you keep your features sort of sustainable, and how do you manage all that? So it's really interesting to see that. I think that's an important part of open source. But anyways, we had that meeting, and then of course this meeting, and we're still on break from our cybernetics and our cognition futures meetings starting up this month. We'll start with those again, and it's we'll pick up on that. So yeah, and then I wanted to point this out. I put a message in the cybernetics Slack channel about the paper that we have that's due soon. Now I talked to Adam Saffron about this, and he said that it's the initial deadline was June 1st, and we can submit our paper. I think up until October 1st. I don't want to spend that much time on this. I want to get this out and reviewed, but I did put the finishing touches on a draft. So this is our cybernetics paper that we're working on for the special issue of Royal Society Interface Focus. And so they have the special issue on sort of like on AI and world models and different approaches to that. I think they're trying to solicit people who have a very diverse set of backgrounds to sort of give an overview of what would constitute a global model for AI. If AI had a model that it could reference all sorts of things in the world, not just the training set, but like have a conceptual world aside from its training set, what would that look like? And what kinds of principles can we bring to bear to sort of get at how to do that? So what we decided to do is to talk about the Every Good Regulator theorem. And this is something from the cybernetics literature. W.R. Ashby wrote about it in around 1970. And it's not something that's been kind of followed up on very much as a concept. the concept is sort of was established, and then people and it did their own thing, sort of adapted from it, but it never really came back into fashion. And so what we're doing in this paper is we're bringing it back into fashion. We're bringing it back into fashion in at least two ways, maybe three ways. The first way is to go over and say, this idea of good regulation is sort of the cornerstone of things like control theory and some of the other models for sort of engineering optimization. And we can apply that to AI in world models. The second one is where you have these sort of phenomena that are out of distribution or far from equilibrium, and we can model those things, as sort of things in the world that you can't necessarily grab from training data alone. You need to have a model, but you need to have a dynamical model. You can't have something like a symbolic model. And we don't get into this too much in the paper, but the symbolic models, of course, are sort of, if you think about like AI in the past, you would have training data. There's that view that, you just need to throw enough data at the model and it will learn anything. And of course, we know that's probably not true. There are a lot of high level concepts that it needs to learn. And so people have just said, well, let's build symbolic models and symbolic frameworks and use that. And what we're arguing here is kind of like not that at all. We're saying that there's this sort of structure, this feedback structure, or this sort of regulatory structure that exists that allows us to, model not only like from a training set, but from these kind of far from equilibrium and out of distribution behaviors. So this, this is just kind of the latest version of this. It'll probably be adapted, and I'm soliciting comments, and I want to get a sense of, how, maybe we need to change some things. Maybe we need to. I don't want to add too. I don't want to add anything because we're at the word limit. So we have an 8,500 word limit, and it's very hard to maintain yourself within that word limit. As you can imagine, what we wrote, what's here is like very wide ranging, and there are a lot of threads in here that you could unpack, and that's not really the point of this paper. The point of this paper is to go through the EGRT, to go through some of the aspects of what they call good regulation from the good regulator theorem. Kind of thinking about that, then thinking about specific cases, toy models, where we can idealize, or what things that challenge idealized good regulation. So things that are non-Markovian, things that are out of distribution, out of equilibrium, and so forth. And then we have, let's see, well, then we have to relate this, I got to change that spelling. We have to change the EGRT, or we have to adapt the EGRT to some of these machine learning and reinforcement learning models, which of course don't think about that, but they have relevance. And then, of course, we need to think about embodied continuous intelligence, because that's kind of where you would go with the EGRT. And, it kind of lends itself to that kind of an approach. And then, how do we connect good regulation to intelligence? So we have a lot of definitions of intelligence in the literature right now. None of them are very good. If we think about what is intelligence, we back up from all the AI hype and you say, what is intelligence? And the answer is not easy to understand. Like, we have definitions of intelligence from psychology and from AI, and it's not clear that we know what it is, nor do we really understand how the models that we're building relate to that. So it's like, if something is intelligent, how do you know? I mean, earlier in the paper we talk about good regulation is this thing that kind of exists as you know it when you see it. Well, that's not good enough for something that you want. You want to have some scientific rigor around, and the same holds true for intelligence. So a lot of definitions of intelligence focus on sort of these human-centric traits, these different features maybe of a machine learning model. they're not really what we would call theoretically sound. They're not sound principles that you can apply to, say, artificial systems or that are very clear to sort of attach parameters to or measurements. And so this is where, we don't really give a lot of time to it necessarily, but it's put in there. Now so this is the paper. It's kind of at the page limit. There are some things that, obviously there needs to go through maybe another editing cycle or more. But I want to get to a point where we can submit it and, get it in probably as soon as possible, maybe in the next month or so. So if we can look at that and make comments, that would be great. And, I do need to write up a sort of a supplemental materials for it as well, because that's necessary. But yeah, I think Adam's really excited about it, and he's excited about maybe working with the group more, collaboration. Okay, yeah. So yeah, Jess, it's fine.
I have a question. So what are the
What's that?
Sorry, I should have raised my hand.
It's okay.
I should have raised my hand. I'm being undisciplined. What kind of diagrams represent? I have lost the page. There are some graphs.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm a bit slow scrolling, but there are some graphs. And what do they stand for?
Oh, well, these are just like, let's see, this is a description of the Every Good Regulator theorem. So this is kind of how they've described it in the literature. It's obviously not that, like, it's very hypothetical. So you have this system, you have a regulator, R, system S, and the regulator tries to model the system. And the idea is that the regulator...
On page 11, right? Page 11, right?
This is actually page 4.
Page 11?
This one is page 4.
Yeah, sorry, I was referring... those I understand. It's the one on page 11. It's not...
Okay.
It could do with a bit of explanation. If you could, a very quick one. I just want to know what it... I cannot make out. The others, I understand what they represent, but this one...
This one here. Yeah. So these are these are graphs. I'm going to write up some supplemental materials. But basically, one of the toy models is this sort of avalanche model, and what I'm doing is I'm modeling avalanches in a in a time series, and those avalanches is showing that the avalanches occur at different times over the course of the sample, and then you have all these different. I gotta change this. And then you can model it in different ways.
The avalanche, like the snow?
Yeah, there's a model in physics called the avalanche model, which is where you have you can build a pile, you can build a pile of sand grains. You drop sand grains down and you build this pile of sand, and then at some point the sand pile gives way and it collapses, and it does this at different rates. So as you build up the sand pile, part of it collapses, and you can measure the collapses. You can measure the uniform adding of grains, and you can get these distributions that are not easily predictable in advance. So these are things where, these are systems that are sort of stochastic and I guess quasi-chaotic, but they're not particularly predictable by, say, like a machine learning model. And so go through this and, kind of gives, some idea of how the good regulator theorem relates to this. So that's what this graph is. And, I don't have the full description in the paper. I'm going to put it in a supplemental materials. So that's why it's kind of sparse here, but it'll improve. But that's what's going on there. Yeah, no problem. So so Jess said.
It's a very long
Oh yeah, no problem. And I welcome your comments on that. We'll probably, Jess is busy right now. We'll probably work on that over maybe the next month or two and get that out by, I don't know. got some stuff to do in August, so maybe before that, at the very latest. So yeah, Hussain says we can talk a bit today about the ethical considerations of closed loop neurostimulation. We can do that in a little bit. Jess says I will be listening in for a while. If you can wait until next week, I'll have a lot more to go through it fully. Yes, so take your time on that, Jess. Looking forward to the paper. Also more with Adam too. Yeah. So we'll see where we go with that. That'll be fun. That'll be fun and an interesting set of collaborations there.
So basically, I would love to be able to give feedback on this paper, but because it's such a long read, and it looks like very dense, and there are a few things which I probably need to look up. I'm not, as much as I'd love to, I may not be able to be very useful to you now because I have a deadline on the 30th of June, and I haven't even started, and I'm writing the paper alone. So I'm looking at you. You have 2-3 months to finish this one original paper, and I haven't started. So, but as a whole, if you're looking for feedback, Bradley, from other people like you who may want to take a quick look without having to read it all up because you don't have the brain power, maybe to have a few bullet points.
Yeah.
Like 10 bullet points of what each of the main sections says, and could help us trigger some feedback without having to do the reading. You see what I'm saying? There are some things like, for example, you talk about regulator. You talk about regulator, and there are some things I like to bring up, but without having a very clear one-shot understanding of what is the question, then I'm not sure whether what I want to say is relevant to you, and I don't want to waste your time. So maybe in one sentence, say what is this paper going for to start with. Do you have it in one sentence?
Not off the top of my head, but yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem that we have. So, but even it could be useful for you in doing your own review, spot the gaps, and for anyone who wants to give feedback. So that's my only contribution at this stage. If you could make a bullet point, I can look at the bullet points and say, okay, I think this could be something to think.
Yeah.
If that's going to be useful, that I can do. But reading, I have to do this other stuff, which is making my phone. So. Looks interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to create some promotional materials as well too, so that would be helpful. Where you kind of say what the paper, like if people want to read the paper or you want to make it relevant to them, you say what is it about and how does it. People do these posts
because I'm interested in this is general systems theory, right? System theory.
It's very related.
And I'm interested in it. I may even be able to say one or two intelligent things, but there is so much to say or to know before. And I look forward to that, Bradley. Yeah. When you have that, I'll be able to give you some intelligence response. And to your question, what is intelligence?
Yeah.
My answer is, which could be relevant here, I don't know, is like, of course, it's very complex. It's not one thing. But intelligence response is a marker for whatever that is. So, I can give you an intelligence response. I need to have intelligent input.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that plays into your setup, but here, to get intelligent input, I mean, if we take the example of your paper, you have a lot of intelligent input there, but I don't have the capacity to process. So these are the things the intelligent signal needs to be delivered in a way that whoever you're trying to deliver it to can process it so that they can respond according to their intelligence. I don't know if this fits in what you're doing, but that's so I look forward to that.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I know. I get it. It's it's something that like like when people talk about machine learning in particular, and that whole conversation people, I don't know, have kind of lost their way on that. Like they'll talk about how like algorithms exhibit sort of super intelligence or sentience, and in the literature at least there isn't a lot that is useful. Like it doesn't relate back to say like people or animals or living systems, or it's just kind of like almost like a self-contained thing where if it recognizes something then it must be intelligent, and it's just the conversation there is not very well rooted in something rigorous. There's a lot of stuff in the history of psychology as well where it's kind of troubling some of the things that people have sort of the ways people have viewed intelligence, but it's also there some ideas there that are kind of need to be synthesized. Good ideas, but they're not like there's no synthesis there, and so it's really kind of a hard thing to cast your net around. And I hope someone actually puts together like a submission on just definitions of intelligence. But we'll see what those look like. The other submissions to the special issue. But
if you have the special issue call, if it's still open, I may have some material, but I don't have enough time when I rush out. The point with it's like you have the ability to. So let's assume in AI, and it depends if it's programmed or if it's not programmed. If it's programmed, it doesn't matter how stochastic it is. It's still designed to follow a process which is intentionally expressed by whoever designed it. But then, what I think people are coming up with, which is interesting scientifically, but is this AI which just thinks by itself, as if it was like the intelligent human coming up with new ideas that nobody has taught. And these are completely two different paradigms, and they're both interesting. I personally do not see the need for the second because we have humans who are perfectly intelligent to come up with great ideas all the time, and they are repressed. They are shown, they are visible, they are not given space. Society can't find activity. And now we want to create machines which are capable of creating without human. And then what? Why do that if we have every human being that capability of think? Every human being tries to express their creative intelligence is not necessarily corresponding states or expressing or the conditions, the continent. So anyway, I didn't know that word.
yeah. Yeah, I'm just taking some notes here. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
You understand what I say, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
So we have this AI, and when you say AI is what? Even if we don't, it's the same story. Intelligence is how to recognize it. But how do you know, how you define AI and what kind of AI is that? So that could be useful to have that to frame whatever you're talking about. But I did that. And if you have a call that you like to share, I doubt I have passed the. When is the deadline?
I think it's October 1st now. So yeah. I'll send you the call.
If you're still looking for something.
Yeah.
I'm interested in cybernetics.
Yeah, I'll send you the call. See if it's something that. Yeah. Jesse, you were gonna say something?
I'm not going to say a whole lot. I'll just say yes to what you said about intelligences, and yes, like it's you know, for context for people who are just seeing the paper for the first time, like we've been talking about these. A lot of this, I mean, some of this is like a really deep theme that we've been talking about since I joined the lab, and sort of an extension from like cognition features and cybernetics. Uh, the both of the reading groups that have kind of popped up around those topics. So it's, you know, if it seems like there's a lot of missing context, it's because the context is from those other things that have been happening for a long time. So just it, for those who are not seeing that is partly where it comes from. It's a really nice opportunity to push these ideas forward that we've kind of been talking about and like the EGRT stuff and and I, even seeing going through it here. I guess well one practical question that's coming up, like for making edits, do you I think we had this in a Google document also. Or do you want edits and review to happen on that Google document or somewhere else, I guess?
Uh, yeah, we might do it on the Google Doc. I didn't put the link in there because
Yeah, that's
I
fine.
wanted,
That's fine.
yeah. But I mean, I can give people access to the Google Doc if that's where they want to put their comments, because it's easier to do that, like integrate it that way, than to do it like by going back and forth between a document. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just,
because
yeah,
and after kind of like after next week, because I don't have the bandwidth right now to do it. I have actually think I have the time, but I don't have the bandwidth
right, yeah.
at
It's
all.
always,
Um, but that will change shortly. So I kind of am enjoying um the idea of having to like go through that and like just a lot of like suggestion of things would be great. But also like what's kind of it's tough because like I don't know if Adam will push the deadline back or not, but there were some things that you alluded to in the discussion now that like I definitely want to do more with. Um, that we have talked about like the intelligences stuff. And you also alluded to um, let's see, like terms in psychology not being well synthesized over time, and that's sort of like I guess de facto a little bit of what we're trying to address with cognition features or what we're slowly doing. Like we've kind of had a meandering path to that in the methods project, but that's definitely what I um you know am doing. Like a lot of some of the other like working groups I'm making within Pro are kind of attempting to synergistically explore those spaces. Like there's an easy way of saying it is uh the models that we have and how they were made and what they kind of speak to. Like I think there's a lot to draw from the analogy that you're out there saying, like, oh, in the machine learning space, it's like this. You have there's sort of these particular takes on like the intelligence or on whatever else is going on, and it's in a similar way. How do I say this concisely? Uh, I think there's not been a lot. You know, I was very to kind of come to a point and reference something that's a little bit more tangible and accessible. Um, you know, let's talk about the cognitive science project and kind of the attempt to put it around computation. Like computation, it was kind of this, going to be this not one ring to rule them all, but this sort of thing that was going to bring it all together. And it's like as long as we could get it to the sort of the mind is a computer, or even like the Margaret Bowden compendium, mind is machine, and it's sort of that's this one major thrust of like cognitive science is this way, and there's a sort of mechanistic approach to what that, and that's fine, but also like I'm very interested in sort of what are the boundaries and what's the proper line of demarcation for a lot of the things that have been happening in that space. And I think some of it touches upon the role of computation and the likeness of a machine to that. But then also like there's this really important dovetails into the things that kind of Morgan's was talking about, I think last time, were like, organoids and whole brain emulation and going to that way and what, how we're interpreting to that level. Um, but still furthermore, there's sort of these paradigms that just aren't, um, the nuance isn't quite there. So even at what I'm kind of starting to break it down in my mind is like broad areas of investigation on this topic that are interesting to me are sort of there's this applied arena, like a lot of the stuff I'm basically making sort of the DISM project is sort of evolving as sort of a broader mental health working group, which I think is a much more applied mesh point of the agent and the environment, right? What's happening there, what's happening in terms of history, what's happening going back in time and in reality. But then also, I guess I'm seeing conditioned futures as, and this is to be laid out much more in other places and not now. But conditioned futures, um, comparatively, as more of a okay, well, almost like an engineering approach, or what's happening, like what are the structures and how do they work in a more abstracted way of like the quote unquote mind or cognitions cognitive things. And I feel like there's like a much better view of all this stuff is one where those two aspects are much more fleshed it's not necessarily fleshed out, but like spoken about in a way that's much more self-aware of each other. And we're looking at like we looked at like Fuchs, we looked at all these people who are you know, like we kind of paused awkwardly at the middle of Tom Froz's eruption theory, which is his own take on, getting back and forth between these other things and the non-dualism of XYZ and all that stuff. And like that's all important. But I feel like there's, you know, it's and you can probably hear my voice like a little bit of all these pent up things that I'm not talking about because we're not doing conditioned futures right now, and so forgive me for that. But it's the sense of I think there's very important ways to look rigorously and consider like not just in a paradigmatic critical or critiquing way, but sort of what's not just what's at the table, but sort of like what are the tables that should be in the dining hall, and how do you want to arrange them to each other? Because again, everybody at the same table, but if you arrange the tables in a nice way, you could have the proper much like things are much more facilitating a conversation if they're done a certain way versus not. And I think at a higher level, a very high level, that's kind of what we're getting at. So I know I'm soapboxing a bit about it, but that's just some recent uh, pent up ideas about all that. So yes,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that, Bradley. And I really look forward to diving into that. And I have to wait a little before I can. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I did want to bring it up. I did want to bring it up because just to make sure that people were aware of it. So yeah,
Yeah.
we're going to be working on it more over time and getting it finished up. I think we've been making some pretty good progress on it over the spring, and this is really the product of a lot of these conversations in these group meetings. So this is what we do in the group meetings. We talk about these ideas, and they kind of float in the air, and we want to bring them down to like some sort of synthesis, some sort of like actionable items. And this is kind of one example of that, how we're kind of shaping those discussions and putting some flesh on the bones. And what I want to do though as well from some of these themes, because this is a paper that has a lot of themes that are in there, is to sort of work out maybe some things that we think are good we have a page limit here, and in a paper you don't want to like throw everything into the paper because you don't want to have like this 40,000 word paper, but you do want to have some themes, and then there are always some themes that you feel like you need to develop more. And so those are the things that you might take and say, we're going to write another paper on this. Like Paola's idea about, different things about models and intelligence and that. That would be like an interesting paper. We wouldn't have to necessarily submit it to this special issue, but we could submit it somewhere else down the line, or, put it out as a
No,
working
but
paper.
Bradley,
Yeah.
now that you pointed me, I'm writing the abstract. So
Oh, okay. All right.
if you guys want to share an abstract, we have probably what time is I'm submitting the abstract, but I haven't. The reason why I'm skipping over people, I apologize, is
Okay.
because I can't cut it. But basically, the reason why you're writing a paper like that, I think, is because I'm looking at the code for paper. The code for paper is not particularly clear.
Yeah, no.
Doesn't have the scope is fuzzy. It's enormously fuzzy, but that's okay because we can work with that.
Yeah.
So, if you have ideas, can we change there's a couple of ways we can do this. I'm going to write an abstract based on a few things we just shared. Plus, the foundational models are in there. We talked about it when I said a few things. The few things that I said now, if you've written them up, which I forgot what I said, but then I'm going to write a fuzzy abstract.
Okay.
And then I'm going to open a paper and we can hack these ideas, flesh them out. I think October is good time. I have another deadline in September, but by now, I should be able. It would be great. So I'm gonna, if that's okay, if you think these ideas are interesting and should be discussed, then let me pick out on a few of them, put the abstract in, and then we can work on the paper. Excuse me, do you know if the abstract, it doesn't seem to have a length specific, right? Or they didn't really ask for any, so what's that, right?
Well, what was that?
The abstract can be just a few paragraphs.
Yeah, usually like maybe a page, a few paragraphs, just kind of going through the ideas. I submitted something in about 600 words, so it's not like huge. It doesn't need to be like a mini paper. It just needs to say what you want to do.
Yeah, because I haven't figured that. But, I will stay vague based on their vagueness and their goal. And I will open a draft for share. So if you become inspired by the end of the summer to have another submission, you can. Would you like to look at my abstract before I submit it, or shall I just?
Yeah, that would be good if you could actually put it in the cybernetics channel.
Okay, I'll do that.
Right, yeah.
And today, in where you are, means in 12 hours. End of today means 12 hours.
Yeah, it's it's probably about 12 hours. Yeah.
If I work through the night, it's gonna be no problem.
Yeah.
It was not my intention to do it.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
So in which case, do me a favor. I'm gonna have this abstract in a couple of hours. I'm gonna work on this now. And if you could give me the feedback before I go to bed, it's like I will wait and then I will put the sleep after. So is that okay? Is that possible? That if anyone interested here, give me the feedback ASAP, and then we can, of course, if someone else wants to be a co-author.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, good. And then in which case I'll switch off and work on this and look out for my abstract channel, and then I will submit it shortly after.
Okay.
Hopefully with your feedback, and if not, we can always ask Adam to update the abstract tomorrow, something like that. Is that okay?
Yeah. I think they just want an abstract to get a sense of where you're going with it. I don't think it's has to be like perfect, but I will give you some feedback on it, and it'll be fine.
That would be great. Thank you so much. Thank you for
welcome,
bringing this up. I didn't know. I think it's something I should be doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see you later. I'll switch off.
Okay. All right. So I think, yeah, I know Hussain wanted to talk about his paper on ethical stimulation, but I don't know. I know he was at a Starbucks and he had to leave, maybe. So if he comes back, we might talk about that a little bit. But otherwise, you know, I think this is a good discussion about the Every Good Regulator, about like AI, and about some of these issues with foundation models and world models and things like that. Definitely, though, yeah, the call is very vague, and I think it's because I don't think anyone has a good handle on these issues. They're just kind of being thrown out into the world in gobs, and like people are trying to figure out how to synthesize them. So that's maybe part of the problem too. And so, yeah, definitely, I think anything would help on that front. Okay, yeah. Then I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about some things that we have that are, I guess, coming up or relevant to some of our discussions in cognition futures and cybernetics again. But these are resources and events. And then I want to get into some experiments I've been doing with large language models. I've been trying to run a large language model on a Raspberry Pi, and I've successfully done that. I'm going to show some of the results of that. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is this event here. This is Coggraph 2024. So this is an event that's happening, I think, at CogSci 2024. So CogSci 2024 is coming up this summer, or I guess the fall. I'm not really sure when it is. But this is a special, I think, a special session affiliated with CogSci 2024. This is Coggraph. And so Coggraph is the intersection of cognitive science and like computer graphics and computer vision. So this is very much like what the special issue is about. They're going to be doing something. So the reason they call it Coggraph is it's intersecting with SIGGRAPH, which is a conference on computer graphics and computer vision. So this is an interesting, I think this is the first year for this type of workshop. This is a new workshop at the interface between cognitive science and computer graphics. So you have the brain and the teapot. The teapot is a model that people have built in computer graphics to show kind of like how computer graphics, this is a classic model that people have used in the field. And then, of course, we're interested in the brain and cognitive science. Building bridges between these scientific communities can help us ask and answer big questions about perception and depiction. So representations like we see up here, perceiving those representations, questions about how we see, communicate, reason, and express ourselves. So it's basically like we're building graphics, in computers, in silico. How do we interact with those? So it's sort of a human-computer interaction perspective, but it's also sort of a perceptual science perspective because, of course, our computer graphics, whether they be on a 2D flat screen or in a virtual world, they are not the same as physical objects on your tabletop or in your room that you're in. And so, what are the sort of the differences between computer generated objects and real objects? And maybe we can make things that are hyper realistic that you can't tell the difference. Maybe there are always going to be some very fundamental differences between the two. And so it very much hits upon this area they call presence, or this idea of being there, and some other themes as well. So this is really interesting stuff. They want to grow a community here. So this is kind of their first foray into doing this. What they're going to do, I guess, they're going to have 4 virtual online seminars. They're going to feature interactive conversations with experts in cognitive science, computer graphics, and the arts. Then in late July, we will convene in person for activities at CogSci 2024. So I think this is going to be held in Rotterdam, but also virtually. I'm not really sure if this is going to be a virtual thing, but definitely the online seminars will be virtual. So they're trying to build a community here. They're going to both CogSci 2024 and at SIGGRAPH. I think that's in 2025. So yeah, so they're just looking for people to sign up here. I don't know if people are definitely, if you're interested, just kind of fill this form out. But these are the seminars. So the first is visual communication. This is a couple people here from two people from cognitive science, two people from computer graphics. At its best, visual computing systems can empower people to communicate with each other and with their computer systems. But sometimes visual computing technologies can lead to miscommunication, confusion, frustration, or worse. So it's that human computer interaction aspect, usability aspect. What causes communication to break down and what can we do about it? So that's interesting. The second one is visual perception. Again, we have 3 computer graphics people, 2 cognitive science people. The idea of modeling human perception is inverse graphics. So this is where it's a specific type of graphics problem. They're just modeling it as an inverse graphics problem. Has long inspired researchers in cognitive science and AI, but despite decades of progress, such a model remains elusive. Why? What is the single greatest computational challenge in running optical or physical simulations in reverse? So I'm not familiar with the inverse graphics approach explicitly, but they're asking some questions about computational problems and how to pose them and how to run these kind of simulations in reverse as opposed to forward. And we talked, at our open source meeting yesterday, we talked about multiphysics, which are these kind of modeling frameworks where you take a system at multiple scales or multiple aspects of a system, and they have different physics. So you might, the unit of analysis might change over your different aspects of your system. Like if you're trying to model a biological system, you might model proteins, you might model other molecular processes, you might model the phenotype, and all those things are happening at different scales, and you have to integrate them into a single model. In this case, you're trying to do things, trying to figure out the properties of graphics and some of these things, and you're trying to model these things in an inverse way, meaning you're trying to reverse engineer the thing that you're looking at or the thing that's in that environment. So it's really interesting. I don't know exactly how they approach it here, but that'll be interesting to see. Seminar 3 is visual reasoning. This has 3 cognitive scientists and 2 computer graphics people. From designing tools to proving theorems. Oh, is that? Oh. Yeah. People rely on spatial and geometric abstractions to solve problems, but of course some abstractions are more helpful than others. So this is about these different abstractions that we use in sort of mathematical or computer representations. We have to sort of not model every aspect of it. We have to take away we have to rely on certain aspects that are maybe the most salient and use that for our model. So this again is, some abstractions are more helpful than others. Why? How can you tell if an abstraction will be useful in problem solving? Visual expression, seminar 4. This has 3 graphics people, 1 cognitive scientist. The field of computer graphics has long been interested in algorithms for non-photorealistic rendering and animation. What is it about the human mind that drives us to create and allows us to perceive images and videos that are not perceptually faithful to reality? So this is an interesting one from the perspective of modeling things that aren't, decidedly not photorealistic. And so this has a lot of ties to, virtual environments as well. So, this would be something to keep an eye on for designing in VR, not just in designing for, 2-dimensional surfaces or, 2-dimensional graphics. So that's Judy Fan is one of the organizers. Jesse knows who that is, and some other organizers here as well. So that's Coggraph. So then the second thing I wanted to talk about is this morphologicalcomputation.org. So this is Morphological Computation. This is their site. And the reason I bring this up is because we've talked about this topic quite a bit in Cognition and Futures, and we keep coming back to this idea because it's very much linked to embodiment. And I think I brought up the idea of morphological computation as this paradigm where you could look at like a morphology. If you have an embodied robot, say, you have a brain and it, or I guess a model that serves as a brain and it does things, and it interacts with the world to some extent. But then the question is, that if you're an embodied agent, how much of a role is the morphology of your body playing in that interaction? And it turns out in this field, they've tried to quantify this and, in different ways. And they actually have, found that there is this role of the body that is important in sensing, controlling, and learning and improving those aspects. So, in robots, body morphologies, the materials and dynamic properties of those body morphologies are extremely important. And so, in humans or in other animals, it's taken for granted that their bodies are the way they are, and we just kind of study that. We don't study so much the material properties of the body, the dynamic properties of the body. Although some people, of course, in some cases, people do. But it's in morphological computation, they really can work this out in terms of measures and in real world conditions. So this is really interesting. You can do all sorts of things in morphological computation. You can create innovative sensory skins for prosthetics, accelerate learning through physically growing robots, embed sensors in things like spider webs, build intelligent structures, scaffold them on biological cells, and exploit things like octopus arms for different computing paradigms. So there are a lot of things you can do with morphological computation, not just study kind of the role of the body. Now they have an ebook that's available, and so that's the other thing I was going to point to here. This is Helmut Hauser, Rudolf Huschlin, and Rolf Pfeiffer, and this is called The Opinions and Outlook on Morphological Computation. So this book is available. I guess just kind of go through the chapters here. They have some really interesting chapters. There are these case studies that they go through to show like the sort of the power of morphological computation. They have this reservoir computing view, which is interesting. We've talked about reservoir computers and sort of how they work, and it's sort of an up and coming area. So that's an interesting chapter. There's also this aspect of morphology and kind of emotions and functional structure. There's a virtual material approach to morphological computation, so focusing on how materials play a role in cognition. There's this aspect of hierarchy, and we think of like models of intelligence as sort of hierarchical. We have things like subsumption architectures, which are structurally hierarchical, one thing built on top of another. But we also have these hierarchical structures, which are where different parts of the system play different roles, and it isn't that one part is dependent on another in its entirety. It's that they all sort of contribute to this larger structure. So it's a different way of viewing intelligent systems. They talk about this in terms of like the body being one aspect, the mind being another aspect, the brain, the environment, and all that. So it's a nice way to sort of synthesize some of these ideas. There's this chapter on morphological computation and heuristic biorobotics. Morphology is a concrete form of intelligence. So we talked about definitions of intelligence earlier and how we have these concrete forms of intelligence. We can kind of sort of characterize intelligence in this way, and molecules and robots, which are where we're looking at molecules as computational machines, And so we think about like robots that are sort of animal-like. We can also have morphological computation that's like protein-like or some molecular macromolecule-like, and that has sort of the same sort of principles. You have different types of interactions between sensory organs, the dynamics, modeling your model of morphological computation on things like bacterial movement, looking at the evolution of morphological computation or when that morphology changes, and some other things here having to do with design and other perspectives. So that's that book, and if that's something that's interesting to you, please check that out. So Jesse put some things in the chat here. I guess this one is, he says exactly, yeah, it relates to work in developmental AI, development in many niche topics. That was in reference to the Coggraph, or was that in reference to, okay. Yeah, Name is going to ask Judy Fan about it. Yeah, please do. I'd like to know more, actually. Then Morphological Computation. So this is like a working group that published this ebook. I think there were people who, I don't think it's related to the Embodied Intelligence Workshop, but it is. Yeah, it definitely the set of ideas.
That you saw to the heart of my question there. I was like, I don't have. Maybe you could put the website in there, or I didn't see it. But from what I could see from your screen share, it just looked like, I guess, like, for people that are thinking about this stuff, and then their call to action was like, get in touch. Like I don't know if that means like work with them, or grad student with them, or join our reading group, or what. Like I don't have any sense of that. And I'm not saying any of that's wrong. I don't know if you know any more than that. I do.
I have no idea. Yeah, I could check into it. But
that's cool. I would get it. I will get in touch. I'll ask about it. And I think, like, again, like that ties into a lot of other topical interests that are like adjacent to it, or like that kind of fits with like adjacent to the dev AI, like adjacent dev AI, some organoid stuff. Like it's in this space of topics that are on hand. And as a shout out to, I'm remembering things that Jen isn't here. I'm remembering things she said about trying to organize some of the stuff to convey it to people who don't, how do we try to communicate that to people who like say, yeah, we here's a set of topics that we're thinking about and published. And it's like there's stuff to do in that space for our like the ongoing work that she's helping with for onboarding stuff, and I'm just like acknowledging that there are conversations going on and to be had there, and like materials to be made there. So acknowledgement of that, and appreciate the work there. But my second point now, if we have a few minutes, I don't know how much time you have. I guess we have like 50 minutes left, but like I imagine you have other things. So I don't know how much free time you have, because I have a point I would like to, a serious point.
Yeah, we have a bit of time, yeah.
Okay. And it ties, I will attempt to wear my reasonable hat, and I'm going to give myself a little time to be unreasonable and just kind of cranky, I think. Maybe that's because I'm like sleep deprived and bandwidth deprived. So just to kind of frame it as, like, I know I'm being unreasonable in one sense, but also there's some fruit to what I want to say too. And it was triggered by going through the book structure, and maybe I missed some of the structure. I'm like the book, and I'm doing a very superficial judgment of the book. And I don't know. Maybe this book is, or the authors are doing one are much. I don't want to have them catching strays, if you will. So I give them a pass and say I proclaim my ignorance about who they are and what they're doing in the book. And I was triggered by the format of some of these books and realizing, I don't know why, but I had this visceral reaction to the 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 format of the books and also format of some conferences that I've been to a lot lately around like not just the similar topics, but more at a meta or like education pedagogical. Um, why don't we have nice things, but like why don't we have nice theories? Kind
Yeah.
of a perspective, and like I know, uh, and the issue is in so many terms. A lot of times you have a book like this or a conference, and you bring people together, and you say, um, "Hey, we're a bunch of writers in this field, maybe a new field, maybe a niche field. We don't we're paradigmatic. We don't have, you know." I'm not saying that's often a thing that's like stated or not, but usually it's the case, especially in many areas of interest that are innovative and places that I'm interested in talking about. And I'm not out on that. But I'm there was something in the book, and it's a very common thing to do to have these books, this like compendium. Hey, we're all going to write a book chapter on our ideas, and we're going to have perhaps widely different theoretical frameworks that we want to use, and that's fine. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I think that's important. Like we have to do that. However, I feel like I want to basically do something. I want to make like a functional administrative framework or like something, because in the most easily accessible visceral embodied version of it, like we're talking about a book, but there's a very similar thing that happens in certain conferences too, which is you'll get these you'll kind of make like I went under that recently. Amazing. I love the conference. I love the event. I love the panels. I love the structure. However, I kept waiting the whole time for there to be a more synthetic, broad ranging discussion that lets everybody be at the table, or at least a lot of people be at the table, with the intention of extracting broader principles or like big themes or like refining. You kind of start the day with a set of questions or ideas, or implicitly even, but then like after everything that's transpired, there's no like synthesis. And maybe some of the organizers do it, maybe some like I'll go back and write a blog post and do it by myself. But there's like this functionally weird. It goes back, and this is something that maybe only Bradley will get right now, or maybe Morgan, if you remember a very niche thing that we said in the lab. But it goes back to the idea of the twirly birds. Remember the twirly
Oh,
birds and just falling into the air, these ideas, discussion, and then they fall down. And I feel like sometimes these events, and sometimes the books even, like the book, but like the events, like you shake the trees and there's a big blast of wind, and all these ideas happen and things come up and great discussions. But like so many of the discussions I've wanted to have in one of the recent events, like I couldn't have them because the conference wasn't structured to give time to that kind of discussion. And it's really like I really think it's part of an administrative or management thing, and it's also hard to do because it requires, like, you can't really plan for it, and it's almost it's a specifically a thing for like all like niche smaller conferences that are on topics that you don't get a lot of time for, that aren't well funded, that aren't and for organizers, you can't like you'd have to like hire extra team just to make this happen the right way. Like I know there's reasons why it doesn't work. Like I'm asking for something impossible here, but I also feel like we're kind of like you're doing all this priming work and you're creating this context and you're having the people in the room and you're getting the discussions like at the first level of the discussion. The second level, if you have a group panel, the time for question and answer, which is never enough time for all the niche things you want to say anyway. But like maybe like if you're lucky, you'll get this discussion at the end that someone synthesizing and saying, "Oh yeah, we had these great conversations today. Let's review a few ideas." But there's not really like this actual synthesizing communication that reviews with. Like, there's no distilling. There's no actually aggregating it. And I like that's for some reason, like, and again, this is no. I hold my hands and I hold the white flag in the air, saying this has nothing to do with. I'm not trying to unload on the morphological computation ebook. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure it's wonderful and nothing to do with that. But I don't like if I was of course everybody wants to rule the world the song, but also like in my like admitting like, oh, if it was just up to Jesse, you'd have a part in these kind of books that are dedicated to this. You'd have a part in commerce that are dedicated to this because it's kind of like put into this, oh well, wouldn't it be nice to do this, but also like I also feel like, well, you're kind of doing all this stuff and doing this work, and then the most important thing, you're kind of like, well, we can follow. Let's follow up on this on our own later. And it's like, all right, like, okay, but there's not really a centering of things that are gonna like certain elements of like structured discussion that will actually push forward or also create ongoing spaces after the moment, because you can't process everything at the end of the day anyway.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why the book, I think, got it for me. I was like, oh, like this would be a great. I don't even know if they do. Maybe they do in this book, but many books where it's just the everybody write your chapter about your idea, as opposed to even like of real general synthesis of some major themes in this process. Some major themes we got were blank. Some major questions that came up were blank, and some, like partial incomplete answers are this. Like I feel like that's the thing that we want to have, but also is so well, like, oh, well, that's not how it works, and we don't talk about it that way. We don't have time to do that, so we have to publish this. We're just like, okay. So thank you for letting this is sort of a bit of a therapy. I think this is basically academic therapy or
Yeah.
like this. So thank you everybody for letting me just trauma dump about this. I apologize for the tone and the dumping of things, but
Oh, no problem. Yeah, I mean, this is always a challenge, right? Like, and sometimes funding agencies will give money to groups who want to have a conference or a workshop that's explicitly designed to sort of get some ideas in place. So, like with Coggraph, what they're
yes,
trying to do is they're saying, okay, we need to frame these ideas. We need to get some people from different disciplines in the room and have these discussions. And sometimes you write a special issue of a journal or a book where you solicit ideas and you say, well, we have this theme. Can we get enough? Can we get people to contribute different things? And it's going to depend on the people who are writing the chapters to kind of do their own thing because they have their own perspectives on things, and you can't like coordinate amongst like 20 people. It doesn't really work well. What you can do is write your own perspective, put it out there, and then see where everyone's perspectives are. And what they try to do with some books and some special journal issues is they try to write like a summary where it says, okay, here are the themes that have emerged from these chapters. And, that's often done in special issues. Of course, that's not really space for synthesizing the ideas, it's just a recap. So, that's your point is well taken that you have to have these spaces. And a lot of times it's what happens with a lot of these special issues that people don't follow up on them. Or like, in the case of a workshop, we fund a workshop for year one in a project and we want to get these ideas out there. But then year two, we don't have a workshop that synthesizes things or we don't have that community to synthesize things or whatever.
right.
So it's a missing piece and needs to be, I don't know how you would do that. It's not a priority usually because
No,
the synthesis usually happens like behind the scenes maybe
and
if it happens at all.
and like I'm I go into this um I don't know, I'll say religion, everything. Like, I go into this not being naive about realizing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But like there's also like I'm just very I'll put it to put in a different hat and a different lens for a second. I do know there are people and groups really trying to do this and to take some like kind of get like I'll I'm kind of uncomfortable with the use of the term sometimes and even using it here, but even who are willing to kind of go to quote unquote first principles of like how are we discussing things at all, but also like I think I'm like I I know there are people doing things like this, but also like I think it's worth considering that like the very structure and and yes, medium is message to an extent, but like the very structure of how we go about these things is such a I don't want to say multiply, but like it's just such a strong influence on the stuff. And like yeah, like why is it the way that it is now? Well, it's because the incentive for people is to publish an idea, to talk about it, and like okay, it's out there. I have the publication of the thing And if you want to do the theory work, and build out the stuff that's on your own. And I hear many like even going back to like many of Amanda's you know Amanda's discontent with some philosophy stuff, like where it's just like, okay, well, here's my idea, and I'm not interested in anything other than my take on this idea and proving it as making it as thorough as possible, which has its place, but also like I think one of the like I want to say in my very emboldened self, like I say, like, well, this is all great, but like the methods we're using here are not going to generate the work that we need to do. So it's like it's and it's just not you're not creating the space where you're like forced to deal with it. Like that that that's not fun. Like
Yeah.
that's not the fun part. Like I mean, and to me it kind of is, but I'm weird and normal that way. But like we're training people to not really to there's no real concept like that's not it's like, oh, okay, nice synthesis issue. But like, it's like, okay, well, where are you pushing this with everything forward? And I'm like, all right. So I guess to come back to down to earth a bit more, what do I want to do with this? I think I'm just realizing there's some I don't know maybe this education banner type work in the lab or like this for anyone who doesn't know this is the stuff I think about all the time in whenever I say the word Joe Pro. Joe Pro is
Okay.
about this. Like at its core, it's what are the actual like what are we what is the means by which we are going to get to be able to do or have the discussions that need to happen to do a lot of important things to push things forward. Like that's what it's about. There's mentoring and there's research and incubator, sure, but like this is like the things that I care about. And I guess whatever banners though we want to talk about, I'm saying like I think I would love to like I don't know where it falls. It's not like lab management, maybe it's conference management, maybe it's like meta like I don't mean to say like, oh well, I just think here's how I think everything should be run and everybody just listens to this whatever. But like I think there's a constructive way to encourage people to incorporate more of the things too. Understanding that you're going like you have like the advice has to be aware and not like ignorant or whatever that like the influence is this way. So I like I've not like you can have a blue sky session about what you want to do here, absolutely. But also like the effective thing is understanding like you have tremendous pressure away from doing these things, and those are valid reasons why, or at least they're realistic reasons why. But relative to that, what do you do? Like when you're organizing, when you're framing time for discussion, when you're running the conference, when you're doing books, like there are choices that can be made about slight incremental changes there that I think about and that I would like to talk more about. So like there's like a whole like meta administrative management whatever like whatever that is. I don't know, but that's like a, a discussion group, working group thing that is sort of like the core of other stuff. So more, I would like to talk about it in the future in a constructive way, as I'm just ranting about it here. But I also am acknowledging we have been talking about versions of this in indirectly, at least in we don't really have like an education banner right here, but like I feel like that's one of the major, like one of my favorite things about the lab is that this is like kind of on the table and we talk about it, and so
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that. But
Okay.
yeah,
No, that's very good stuff, and I encourage us to think more about that. And yeah, so
yep,
Morgan,
to be continued. But
yeah,
yeah, we can put on other stuff. So I took a lot of time, so thank you for that.
you're welcome. Morgan, did you have something to say? I know you've been waiting.
Oh no, no. I mean nothing, pressing. The most recent meetings that I've been to have been the Foresight run ones, which is I kind of like because it's basically the whole workshop or conference, if you will, is filling out a group Word doc.
Yeah, yeah.
Like there's a certain, it's nice. It's nice that there's nice that there's an output. It's nice that the output isn't done. Like the output is still there when you leave. If you think of something else.
I actually really want to do more with the Foresight Institute specifically, kind of because I think they're one of the, like, it's kind of, I'm not trying to be like too like ironic, but like I do believe like they are trying to actually have foresight in like what they do and how they go about stuff. So like I haven't done a lot of events, but I know you've been there. Logan's been there. Other people have been there. So it's like I feel like okay, that's a community that's trying to embrace some of these principles. But also like shout out to plot twisters, who we're not running conferences, but like we've done a lot of this stuff and how we try to do things. Like, I really it's I don't have anything tangible that I can easily share about that. But even when we were talking, like we basically alluded to this heavily at our inclusive gaming conference because half the discussion was on like co-design for gaming, but also like how the organization is structured to intentionally address challenges that are happening in the world and like how things are made and how things are done. So like big shout out to plot twisters for that, and like that's one of the like excuse me, that's there are groups that are doing things that are like innovative and kind of centering these ideas more. And I anytime that comes up or whatever, like I don't even know where to say like mention it in Slack. But, like I don't know, just tell me about it and send to Jesse and we'll put it somewhere. And because I do like, if anything, this is an allusion to this is a not currently accessible, but like this is a major topic of interest that I'm fleshing out things in. So we can move on. Yeah, thank you.
It says here in the chat, the way you can think about this is Jesse has hard time that every conference isn't designed to be like one of the old Macy's conferences. So yeah, it's definitely that sort of idea that you're bringing people together, but the way they did it there is sort of a model maybe for how we should do these types of integrative exercises. And I don't know if like they just were really good at doing this or if they had a specific reason for doing Macy's conferences the way they did. But
well, I think some of that is all like I'm mentioning that because of cybernetics and stuff too, but also like I think there's a certain ripeness, and I like and just like things there were conversations to be had that just weren't happening. And now I feel like if there was to be, I forget, they were like in the 40s or something, right? 40s
yeah.
or 50s. So like we did a 100-year anniversary of that and did it well. What would that look like? It would look like here's where the conversations have kind of gone in the last 100 years, in various fields and subfields and whatever, like things that didn't exist at all, obviously. But then like I feel like it'd be really cool to do it at a first principles kind of way. We're like, okay, let's withhold that we know there's been 100 years of development, but then also let's take that too. Like I'm trying to come up with language for talking about like how do you deal and abstract for the ideas almost like what is the idea and where did it go versus what is it relative to the groundedness of what's happened, like the historical things that have happened, while realizing that sort of almost like uh, it's a phenotype of possibilities for how those conversations could have went, and not the whole thing, but it's a certain base of environmental interactions where they've gone, right?
Yeah.
So like I'm trying to develop language around this because I feel like we have so much pressure away from like context of that nature, and we're kind of like like I feel like so much conversation is like it's like we're seeing people bounce into these walls and bump into walls and like trying to go in directions like there's not really language to say, hey, there's a wall here and it's here because of this stuff that's happened for a long time. So like, you know, you don't have to run into it, or like if you're hurt, here's why, because you ran into this wall. And like that's why there's pain around this topic or like resistance. And we're like we're just kind of watching people that do it. It's like, well, no, that's tough, isn't it? It's like, well, there's gotta be something that can be done here. But anyway, I
Yeah.
won't even digress. So
Yeah, this is always how people blame the system for things that don't happen or don't happen. And it's like, well, yeah, the system, we don't, we say it's a system. We don't, know what the contours of the system are necessarily. We just operate within the system. And if things don't happen, we maybe blame ourselves but the idea of a system is sort of, there's no agency there. It's just kind of like, I'm just going to do something. And if it can't happen, then too bad. And if you want to change things in the world of academia, or especially when you're exploring a new field, maybe you need to understand why things are the way they are to make change.
and
Yeah.
one very brief tangent. This is this is this is so amazing. Like this, I'm not. I wish I could share the full context of how what Riley just said is the most full circle thing, given what's happened this week and other things that I'm doing. And I'm like, unfortunately, that just I'm going to truly try to hold back and be concise. But I will say, I've had conversations this week specifically about that, and even specifically about the sort of the DSM project, which is kind of evolving into like the mental health working group or something. But in a very applied sense, like when you are talking to a mental health professional, when you're talking to a doctor, like the nature of what Riley just said and the conversations you're having about treatment or care with awareness of that or lack thereof affects things quite a bit. Like do people like is there and there's reasons for it not to. Like in some cases, if you have stability and you're approaching a doctor or a professional whose main goal is ensuring that stability of your condition or of your whatever, that's not necessarily wrong or bad, but it's different from going to a doctor or going to an environment or going to trying to get treatment or trying to understand things where there is systemic awareness and change too, or like someone who understands or at least sees their job or their approach as like moving the ball, changing the goalpost or changing the arena somehow. And it's just like totally different kinds of communications interactions. And I'm not saying one's better or worse. It's just we don't have good language for differentiating those kinds of conversations or discussions, and it's left to be very abstract and a lot of potentially avoidable strife, no less more fruitful outcomes to be made when there's progress in that space. So yes, I'm being super vague, but that was a wonderful turn of words. So thank you, and I will step away from the mic.
You're welcome. Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah. So Morgan, did you have anything else to say before we move on to?
Well, just there's some interesting, just in terms of updates in general.
Yeah,
Updates.
yeah.
Yeah. The sorry, I'm just seeing. Um, yes, I was just checking Slack here, and did you get access, Jesse, to Medarc Discord? There's a couple new organoid intelligence papers. Um, the this open and remotely accessible neuro platform for research in wetware computing, and a new one from the DishBrain. I haven't posted it in Slack yet, but looks interesting. So another company is doing a version of DishBrain, and I got to meet this week with a student from University of Michigan who, recent grad, I should say, who has been talking to this particular Swiss company called Final Spark. That's the company that's doing something like Cortical Labs. That looks interesting. Still seems quite it's quite modest in its goals, right? Like DishBrain, in the sense that like this is still there's still a number of problems to be solved in terms of really exploiting 3D organoids in a let's call it in a computer engineering kind of way. And anyway, it was great to meet with Michael this week. It was great to meet with his students. He's familiar with a bunch of other groups trying to work on organoid intelligence. So we had a great conversation about different approaches and different groups interested. So that was really nice. The Celsius Biolab, How to Grow Almost Anything, was focused on biomanufacturing and lab automation this week. So got to think a little bit about that as well, in terms of just identifying some things that will probably be useful for cell culture and again, like organoid culture. There's a lot of is currently it's a very manual process run primarily by postdocs and cell culture people. And that involves some quality assurance as well. And so just thinking about the lab automation and computer vision that could be a part of the just trying to scale that. And I think I mentioned this last week, but Alison Moutri's lab did publish. No, maybe I mentioned it at DevoWorm. But just that Alison Moutri's lab had released a protocol this month that they call their semi-guided, like I forget exactly, endogenous oscillations. Let me see what he called it. Generation of semi-guided cortical organoids with complex neural oscillations. and it got highlighted by Axion Biosystems as well. So, which just again reflects this. There are companies that aren't organoid specific, but biotech companies that are interested in being the equipment manufacturers for this.
Yeah.
and this follows Braingineers, Katerina Wojtuk. I forget how to pronounce her last name, but doing some things with Maxwell Biosystems. Anyway, in this particular case, they're just it is one setting out the protocol for others who if you want to get the kind of oscillations that we were getting in our 2018 paper, this is the protocol, and it was a nice blueprint in terms of if you're interested in the electrophysiology, specifically these complex neural oscillations. What's different between the unguided growth and the semi-guided cortical organoids? That is, it gives you kind of the tissue differentiation differences that are apparently key to getting this complex behavior. So that's what I was kind of trying to get at Diva Worm in terms of just like what would we, how many things would we want to track and how many things do we think would be important to capture molecularly that would reflect these differences, right?
Yeah.
Because again, like in terms of setting some of the like the science, like our own personal organoid research science goals, the kind of the bioelectricity or the electrophysiology to some degree is of real interest. And again, it's somewhat tied to the kind of larger work in terms of interpretability of like adult EEG, as well as like how much because electrical signals are available far field, how much physiological information can we get by detecting electrical fields and inferring about microphysiology, right?
Yeah.
So that
it's cool.
That was great. I mean, like organoid intelligence. Understanding bioelectricity or understanding the complex oscillations is part of this organoid intelligence program in terms of how to do, how can you use biology to create to create structures that one are amenable to computational neuroscience modeling, and two would be kind of again kind of amenable to being used, most readily used as neuro coprocessors or neurobio coprocessors, right? And so it's covered this, but I've really put this into a talk in terms of just ideas from going back to um, the book of Genesis, but of course by that I mean the book of Genesis, the computer simulation program, right? And Jim Bowers, which I looked up and I checked, and it was copyright 1994. So I had just graduated college, and the Jim Bowers' focus with Genesis on the cerebellum, and like just being an example of perhaps a 3D biological structure that leads or lends itself to a I mean, one of the reasons he chose it was for ease of modeling, right? And to some degree, you could see it as being a bunch of the same unit just repeated, which again strikes me as somewhat semiconductor design principle. Yeah. And then it also fits in with a number of modern views of cerebellum as being this general purpose coprocessor that actually serves other functions, or serves as a processing system for varied functionality, right? Which is again slightly CPU. But being very unsure of kind of what representations are being fed into that and what operations are being done on it. Like we're still, and hopefully, that they have a kind of universality. And then there's, I just thought it was also, like you'll see in Brain Organized, this big emphasis on DNA modeling, which includes something new from the Brain Engineers. And it's important to remember that the Brain Engineers are in the Institute of Genomics there. And so it should be no surprise that groups like that are of course really interested in the same thing in terms of just how to now that we are growing these organoids, how can we capture the differences in expression and the differences in cellular physiology, such that we can understand mechanistically what's happening in health and disease, right? But there's some good links there. I thought the talk on the Human Regulome was really interesting, and giving a nice historical overview of the ENCODE project as well. And there's a new tool from Genentech, and it looks like it's a former in sitro person, which is the another big tech approach to biology. Alumni. And their tool just also reminds me of the Regulome approach from Basel, which is I think like Roche's R&D center, well, actually, Genentech is Roche.
Yeah.
In these days of multinational consolidation, yeah, they're all one org
Right.
corporation. But really, really nice overview for everyone, and that might also be interesting if you're following the computational psychiatry. There's been some papers from Psych and Code. They had like 9 papers in Science, and so some big stuff in terms of that. Statistical genetics in the brain.
Oh, do you know what this is? It like a special issue of Science then that they've?
I don't know if there's a special issue. Anyway, I will check that. But again, like super super valuable to just capture that history of encodes, and again, the importance of these regulatory elements. How much we've learned over the past 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks. Yeah, that was good. We'll have to look those things up and follow up on them. I'm glad to see that organoid intelligence is making some progress, and we can follow up on that. I think there's a lot of stuff with respect to regulatory frameworks or sort of models of regulation that can be applied there, probably are useful there. But we'll see.
Yeah, and just to also shout out, or definitely. Again, I might have kept this in Celsius just because it's got more organoid intelligence than brain organoids in general, but just a great group in Newcastle that is doing DNA organoid computing. That again, it's like a really cutting edge synthetic bio community there.
Yeah.
I'm going to drop a link in for that too. But,
All right. So let's move on. I wanted to talk about this experiment I was doing with large language models. I also forgot I have this. Wanted to talk about the 1 billion row challenge in data science. So let me share my screen. It's kind of interesting. So yeah, the first thing I'll talk about then is this 1 billion row challenge. So Paola and I had a conversation about like what I talked about last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, with respect to SimCity and spreadsheets and things like that, and how when we build simulations, we really have like these representations of data, and spreadsheets offer this interactive way to deal with it. And she wasn't actually familiar with how people do things by importing data from like different formatted files and things. So I explained to her how that works. But this is an interesting point with respect to data, very big data sets, and something that you'll see in data science as you do analysis of like very large data sets that we have now. So it turns out that like when we're dealing with small sets of parameters, if we summarize things in tables like we saw with SimCity or with some of the urban simulations where we just set sort of the values for the parameters, and that's what we're dealing with. That's we can deal with that easily and feed that into like a simulation and do the simulation over time. But sometimes we have very, very large data sets. And so this is where there's this challenge that a number of organizations have been kind of dealing with because it's a practical limitation to their ability to deal with data. So this is called the 1 billion row challenge. So a row is sort of this horizontal column in a data table. And we usually want to have cases that are, inclusive of a lot of different observations. And so in this case, let's say you have a text file with 1 billion rows. And so the text file is just the input format. And it represents this table where each row represents a measurement from various weather stations. So we have weather stations around the world. We have this coverage of 1 billion data points. Each data point is a row in this text file. And so how do we extract all of these data, get the summary statistics, the minimum value, the mean, the maximum temperature in this case, and then display the results sorted alphabetically by station. So if we were using a spreadsheet, that would be really, really trivial. And even if we're using something like a pandas table in Python, that would be really trivial, right? But when you have 1 billion rows or 1 billion cases, it's a little harder to deal with, just simply because we don't have the computational techniques worked out for that scale of data. And of course, we are getting that scale of data in a number of areas. We have that in social data, we have that from the internet, we have it in biological data as we get more of these omics data sets. So this is a very relevant problem. And so there is this 1 billion row challenge. And so in, the beginning of 2024 got the Java community very excited. So in this case, they're talking about doing this 1 billion row operation in Java and writing the script for it and getting it to, writing the program and getting it to a point where you can just execute it on the command line. On the 1st of January, Gunnar Morling, Java champion, announced on his blog the 1 billion row challenge. So this is a rather new challenge. The idea was to write a Java program for retrieving temperature measurement values from a text file and calculating the min, mean, and max temperature per weather station. The file had 1 billion rows, and the program should print out the values per station, alphabetically ordered. So we're not trying to filter the rows necessarily by relevance or filter out the noisy measurements or any of that. We're just simply trying to get the descriptive statistics for these 1 billion measurements, and for a couple of variables, where we're going to create a couple of variables from that 1 billion rows. So that's basically what the challenge is. And so the goal of this challenge is to create the fastest implementation. So it's not just how to do it, but how to do it quickly, as opposed to like something where we have to spend a lot of time getting the data out of that format. So this is, hundreds of Java developers have gotten into this challenge using different tricks and techniques to optimize their code. This is very classic sort of hackathon stuff where, people are trying all these different approaches and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't. So some people were using low-level Java APIs to communicate with the source data file, virtual threads, the new vector API, or optimizing garbage collectors. So these are all different techniques that people are using. So this person, Antonio Gonsalves, decided to enter the challenge using GitHub Copilot Chat for IntelliJ IDEA to learn about Copilot. So this is a Microsoft development blog, so of course they're going to do the Copilot advertisement here. This goes through sort of using Copilot to do this. And of course, what you have to do then is prompt the model in order to extract the data. So you're training the data on these billion rows. You're prompting it for the minimum, the mean, and the maximum, and things like that. And it's able to generate the appropriate data. So, this is, of course, one approach, but, it makes sense when you think about it. You train the model on the data. You then extract the variables that you want through some sort of prompt. And if your prompt is good enough, you can get the answer. And, it precludes a lot of sort of, brute force extraction, let's just say. So this is where, this is going over how you can optimize the algorithm, and then getting the result. And then, it's an interesting challenge. This is a graphic showing your prompt. You review, modify, and iterate. You confirm the accuracy and finalize. And we talked about this last week with respect to large language models that, how do you achieve some sort of, training in terms of, sort of giving it some sort of set of prompts that are iteratable and have some other properties that are not just brute force properties. So this is the one example. This is another example here. The 1 billion row challenge shows that Java can process a 1 billion row file in 2 seconds. So this again is talking about this. This is a graphic of the 1 billion row challenge. Here, let me zoom into it. So again, where you have your rows, your temperature values, your Java program, whatever it is, you have to sort of define how to calculate that and then execute it over that in a short amount of time. We don't want to spend a lot of time on it. So the challenges rules are simple. Only the SDK features running on any Java distribution may be used, so you can't use a lot of external libraries or data stores, which limits what you can do, but also it increases the drive for creativity. It allows you have to be creative given the tools that you have in the SDK. And so this is where you can use these kind of, you can not use just any, the most expensive approach, but use something that's really creative. It really kind of constrains you and makes you be creative. Here is a question from the interviewer. Did you encounter anything surprising in the solution space? Morling, who we discussed as the sort of the poser of this challenge, says hacker is going to hack many solutions optimized for the specific key set, such as weather station names. This worked just for this particular data set. With the help of the community, we clarified the purpose. So there were many interesting solutions. The use of SIMD and the new Java native memory API, and the highly optimized parsing functions, including SWAR, which is SIMD with a register. SIMD being single instruction, multiple data. It's a framework. It's kind of like multiple input, multiple output. So this is SIMD, where it's just a data architecture where you have a single instruction and then you can get multiple data. And it's a type of parallel processing. So there are a lot of things with parallelism that are really intriguing that people have been kind of developing in terms of software, and this is one example of that. And then finally, this is the 1 billion row challenge GitHub repository. This is where you can find things related to this challenge. There's some, people have submitted their average calculations here, different entries, so you can review these entries, looking at them, different implementations for the problem at hand. And then we have a leaderboard somewhere, which is, I'm not seeing it here, but I guess it's at this site where he kind of talks about, who's leading this challenge. I don't see it immediately, but the point is that if this is something you're interested in, you can follow up on it. I don't know if anyone would have a better solution than what's been posed as of today, but it's just something that's happening. It's really interesting given some of our discussions on processing data and data science. Okay, so now I'm going to get to what I promised about the large language model experiments. And so what I did was I wanted to implement a large language model on a Raspberry Pi. And if you're familiar with the Raspberry Pi, it's a small device. It's not very powerful, but it's something that has an ARM architecture. So it's actually like Apple Silicon in that way. It's not as powerful as Apple Silicon. But the reason I bring up Apple Silicon is because I've done some work implementing a large language model on Apple Silicon, and I wanted to see how small you can get the how sort of low power you can get the hardware to execute these type of models. And there are a lot of models that can run on Apple Silicon from Hugging Face. They have a number of models that they host that can run on Apple Silicon, and it's a challenge. It'll take a while, as you'll see. But you can also do this on a Raspberry Pi. And they have a type of model called a llama that will run well on this. So this is run on a Pi 400. So this is the Raspberry Pi 64-bit operating system. This is based on Arch Linux, so it's part of the Arch Linux distribution. They've just modified it for this Raspberry Pi hardware. It's an ARM architecture. It's like 4 gigabytes of RAM. So we're working with a very low-powered machine for large language models. Basically, what you're doing is you're installing a llama. I have some pictures of the screen here. Screenshotting was not great because it was using all of its memory running this model and setting it up. So what you do is you do this through the command line. You get a llama, you install it, and a llama is a Linux-based model for large language models. So what it does is it installs a llama, and then you can choose from the models that you want to run. There's a number of models with different numbers of parameters. So I picked the one with the lowest number of parameters, which was phi3. And so I ran phi3. I got everything installed. And basically, it gets to the point where you can issue a prompt to the model. So you have to install a llama. It installs the models. And then it'll check to see if you have a GPU. Obviously, we don't have a GPU here. We can only work on a CPU. We run phi3, which runs a bunch of things here, sets it up, and then you get this, and then you can get to the prompt. So let's go to that. This is running the model. So here's where it sort of gets to success. These dots just kind of move around, and then you have to enter your prompt here. So that's the idea. So it's working from it's working from an install, and you're from a command line, and you're able to just prompt it there directly. So the first thing I did was I wanted to put in some prompts to test it. So I did a very simple prompt first, which was, what is 25 by 25? Actually, I did one before that, but I'll get to that in a minute. What is 25 by 25? This is something that a large language model can answer pretty easily because it's just an addition problem, and it outputs the sum of 25 and 25 is 50. This is a basic arithmetic calculation where you add the two numbers together. So that's the answer, and of course it generates this very slowly. So I'm sitting there watching the thing move. I'll show you some videos of how fast it is. It's not very fast, but it gives you the answer you want, at least for that prompt. So that's basic addition. The first question I actually asked it was, how many apples are in a card? I misspelled it. But basically it got this idea, it basically extracted the main idea here where it says, as an AI, I am unable to view images or physical objects. However, if you can describe the number of apples and their arrangement in a cart, I can help you calculate the total based on your description. So it doesn't want to make it guess. It just kind of gives you this instructions on how to prompt better. And it says, please provide specific details like dimensions, orientation, or any distinct features so as to give an accurate verbal description. So that's interesting that it tells you how to prompt it better, which is interesting. But that's how it worked. And then then I asked it a little bit more detailed question, but something it should know. What is the history of large language models? And so this is where it's generating a multi-part answer. So this is where it gets a little bit weird because it doesn't actually give me what I want here. It says large language models have an evolving history. It says early attempts, late 20th century. The concept of using statistical methods for natural language processing began to take shape in the late 50s with researchers like Noam Chomsky in his work on transformational grammar influencing computational models of linguistics. Good. We have one answer. Then the second answer, rise of machine learning, 1980s. And that says one cooking utensils fry pod. A fry pod is a kitchen tool designed for multiple pieces of food simultaneously, like chicken and it gives me this answer that's not really related to the rise of machine learning. So I'm not really sure why it went down that path. But then we go down a little bit more. It finishes its thought, which is basically about fry pods for some reason. But then it gives it another two, which is the internet era. in the 1990s. So it skips over this rise in machine learning. It gives me another 2 in the internet era, which maybe should be 3, but I don't know what happened, why it glitched out here. It could be the memory, the limitations in memory. It could be a problem with the training of the model. I don't know. And then this is the third, this is where it's generating this third point here. This one here where it gets down to talking about the GPT series. It's completed a number of other points. And then it says the history shows a trend towards increasing scale. So it gets like a lot of stuff right, but it does get that, takes that detour. It can compose this really long answer. And yeah, so then we finally get to the sort of towards the end here where, you know, it's kind of going through here. And then we get to the end where it ends and it shows like another prompt. So once I get done, I can prompt it again. I can make a more specific prompt, whatever I want to do. All right, so that's good. So I'll just show some of these videos. This one is where I'm recording. This is, if you see down at the bottom, how it's kind of, the cursor's kind of moving through the words in maybe about 6 or 7 letter chunks. That's the speed of this, you know, the tokens coming through this model. So it's not incredibly fast. You know, if you were to run this on like a demo of OpenAI's, you know, ChatGPT, it would be faster than this. It's going to be like slow because it's on constrained hardware. You know, Apple Silicon works a little bit better, but it's not that great of a difference because it's passing tokens out, and really, you know, you need like a lot of computational power to be really like sharp. So I mean, I don't know what the constraints are here. The model is very lightweight. It doesn't have as many parameters as like a state-of-the-art model, so that's something to keep in mind. And again, you know, it's passing out tokens at a sort of a constrained rate here. So it's really slow in general. And like I actually, on the Raspberry Pi 400, you can put in different operating systems. So I did this with Raspberry Pi OS, but then you can also, I was using Manjaro, which is a Linux distribution, and it was really, really, really slow using that. So it really depends on the efficiencies of the operating system on that. So it's really something that can constrain you, not just the hardware, but the operating system as well. So this is the Ollama repo. This shows you kind of the files that you need to run this. You can run it from the command line, but you can also install it like this. You know, and so this is basically for Linux. You can't install this on Mac Silicon. You can install it in Windows as long. I guess you can do Mac OS. I couldn't do it. I don't know what happened. I guess you can do it, install it directly, but I was having trouble running it on Mac Silicon, so Apple Silicon. So this is an article from Jeff Geerling, and I was wondering about this. This is the final thing I'll talk about here. But I mentioned that there's this sort of lineage of ARM processors, and so ARM 64-bit processors. So you have the Raspberry Pi, which is ARM 64, and you also have Apple Silicon, which is ARM 64, but much more powerful. And so this is, Jeff Geerling writes a number of things on Raspberry Pi, and he's very interested in that. And so, you know, this is really something that, you know, first of all, for ARM architectures, they're very promising in terms of efficiently dealing with memory and things like that. But there isn't a lot of software really designed to exploit those architectures very well. So, you know, this is a direction in which I think it's really interesting to build these very small deployable large language models. We can use ARM architectures to do this very efficiently, but we really need to write software for ARM architecture very specifically to exploit a lot of these features. And like with Apple Silicon, you know, I know people have been developing for Apple Silicon for a while now, but really I think there's probably a lot more potential for developing things for ARM architectures. And it's notable that the only 2 local machines I've gotten large language models to run efficiently or at least reasonably on have been ARM architectures. So yeah, it's an interesting set of experiments. Yeah. So I think Jesse had a couple of comments here I wanted to get to.
They were for other things.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
we can go back to that later. But
Okay.
no, it's really cool to see this. Go ahead, Morgan. Yeah.
Morgan, yeah.
Oh, just I was just going to say that yeah, the people that I know care about these kind of architecture things. They might say it really speaks to just the Intel chipsets baggage.
Yeah.
That like yeah. I mean, there's some cool things about ARM, but it's really that it doesn't have to it doesn't have to maintain such compatibility, legacy compatibility.
Right.
Um, and that they've been able to use that to get a bunch of things like real power efficiency is kind of what I would say is their hallmark at this point. Is like, again, everybody, as you see with the as you see with the organoid intelligence, it's all about doing the same computing, but just with 1,000th of the power.
Yeah.
Right? and yeah, so you'll like this, or like that's just a great example because it's this organoid intelligence platform is using LLMs, or they want to use these to do things like LLMs. And there's also I'll post this in Brain Organoids, even though this is kind of more of a neuromorphic computing, but the open neuromorphic lab at UCSC had a spiking neural network for large language model.
Okay.
And apparently that same PhD student just did a like a self-driving framework, and there's some interesting stuff about just again their having kind of more of an electrical engineering or computer engineering perspective on what are the best what are the best algorithms to tackle, and and he kind of makes some statements again about neuromorphic computing that again I think are really valuable. So that a nice demo there.
Yes.
I liked, yeah. As well as like I just I haven't done I've had a couple of Raspberry Pis around, and I've been meaning to do like I should be doing more Fedora testing, and we there's a Fedora ARM image. I could be I could be trying some of these things, but that's cool to do the large language model too. It'd be interesting to try. The Microsoft Phi, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. They've got like they got a micro model.
Yeah, that's what I was using. I think Microsoft.
Oh.
Yeah.
P3,
but that was the Microsoft model.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Because I also got to get better with all these terms.
Yeah. Well.
I mean, like what is a I was helping somebody with an Enigma, like this is psychiatric neuroimaging processing.
Yeah.
And we were dealing with it's like AFNI tools, which are from NIMH.
Right.
and you know, we're going through, as you would, like the man pages. Afni's a very Unixy, you know, it's old school Unixy tools, and then you know, because he's a younger guy, he's just like, well, let me just ask ChatGPT this. and, you know, and a couple of the Celsius people too, they're like, you've never used ChatGPT? I'm like, but I really, you know, and it was really, you know, it was nice. I mean, even though I know it's never looked at AFNI tools before, it doesn't know, you know,
Right.
you know, its ability to do that kind of just on the fly, yeah, retrieval and yeah, was very cool. But I it, like Llama, isn't Llama a specific framework?
Yeah, Llama is a type of model, and that's a lot more parameters than Phi. Phi is a reduced model with.
Okay,
I can't remember the
but
number.
You were using
but,
Phi.
yeah, and I think they have
Yeah.
Llama in a Llama too, but it's like larger. And the idea is that, you know, I didn't want to use a huge model because you're trying to get, it's going to be a lot slower to try to run. So, you know, with the hardware constraints, I
Okay.
wanted to run a reduced model. You could, on an Apple Silicon, I can run the Llama models, but I didn't show that demo. But you know, it works on more powerful software. And then, of course, if you have all the computational power in the world, you can run these big models
Sure,
very
sure.
efficiently.
But was that like an 8 gig Raspberry Pi or
4 gig, actually.
4 gig?
Yeah.
4 gig. So yeah. I mean, I'm curious of at what point does memory become a bottleneck? Like, I haven't seen anybody do these kind of reduced footprint versions of this.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I think I was surprised that it worked on the Raspberry Pi. I mean, I know that people have been like saying, you know, people have been trying to get these really small models onto small hardware. So, yeah, that was one of the things I wanted to try out. Jesse asked, what would you like to do with this going forward? Yeah, I'd like to, you know, see how small you can get the models and the hardware. That's always good. But also, you know, you could use this if you wanted to deploy a Raspberry Pi in a robot, and you could use that as like the brains of the thing. You could use a large language model or figure out how to build like some sort of model with a lot of parameters and say, how big can we get these models on this hardware, and how small can we get the hardware, and see how, you know, what that kind of relationship looks like, how that scales.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, the scaling is certainly one. The other thing, I mean, you know, when we talk about putting it on a robot, what we also mean is like, how long can that robot run?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, like if you know, because yeah, if it's doing the agency, then you're kind of using it.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, so the power efficiency overall, and you know, and that speaks to again this open neuromorphic, you know, talking about large language model for spiking neural networks. And
yeah.
I know we're almost at the end of time. I just that there was. Did you see the this spiking neural cell paper?
No.
Anyway, I'll post the link to. They're using recurrent neural networks in some way to do spiking neural networks. And yeah. And I haven't figured out whether this is useful for spiking neural networks or if it's just useful for recasting everything as the tried and true, you know, kind of stuff that's already running in TensorFlow.
I can take a model based on this thing and then recreate the thing.
Yeah. Which I think, like, haven't people done that with RNNs before?
Probably.
Anyway, I'll post it and I'll keep it in organoids. Or do we have a computing channel?
Yeah, we have a couple channels that could be appropriate.
We never did start an LLM channel. you know.
It's
like,
kind of
we've got
in,
the, like data science
yeah.
ML thing. I think that's
Okay.
close to it.
That seems a big catch-all.
yeah. Well,
It is.
Yeah, good deal.
all right.
You might want to check out the brain organoids for some of the LLM stuff of genes, though, Bradley.
Oh yeah, and we've been talking about that in DevoWorm, where we've been talking about like how they're building large language models for like protein sequences and gene sequences, and
Yeah,
you know,
there's another one. There's another one that I'd be, again, it's like I don't have a good venue to talk about this, just in terms of I thought an interesting opinion piece on this is the cell on knowing a gene, the distributional hypothesis of gene function.
oh yeah, I saw that paper actually. Yeah.
And again, there's just we're living in interesting, biotheory times.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to talk about that in DevoWorm, that paper.
okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, good deal.
All right. Well, thanks for attending today, and have a good week.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.